Paul was a simple man. He was not a soldier, not a leader, and not a rich merchant. He was just a mechanic who worked on a trade station that floated on the edge of the galaxy. Every morning he would wake up, wash his face with cold recycled water, and head down to the hangar bays where he repaired ships. Some days were busy with freighters and shuttles arriving one after another, while other days were quiet and slow, with Paul sitting on a metal crate, wiping grease from his hands, and listening to the distant hum of engines. He never thought his life would change. For him, the stars were endless, but his life felt small and ordinary. One day the alarms rang across the station. It was not the sound of danger, but the sound that announced the arrival of a royal vessel. Paul had never seen one with his own eyes. People rushed toward the viewing decks to catch a glimpse. The hangar chief barked orders for everyone to prepare. A massive silver ship drifted into the docking bay, its surface shining with strange patterns that shimmered like flowing water. It was unlike any ship Paul had ever worked on. When the vessel landed, guards in tall armor marched out, their faces hidden behind glowing visors. Behind them stepped a young woman with silver hair and a crown that seemed alive, as if the jewels within it were burning with soft light. The crew around Paul whispered in awe. Some knelt, others simply stared. This was Princess Mira, heir to the Caloran Empire, a name known across 100 worlds. Paul did not kneel. It was not out of pride or disrespect, but because he was holding a toolkit and wiping oil from his hands. He thought she would never notice someone like him. But Mira's eyes scanned the hangar, and for a moment they stopped on him. Her look was not one of pride or arrogance, but of someone carrying a heavy weight. Later that day, Paul was called to inspect the royal ship. A core system had failed, and the royal engineers struggled to repair it. The hangar chief pushed Paul forward, saying he had steady hands and a sharp mind when it came to complex machines. Paul entered the ship with nervous steps, feeling small under the gaze of armored guards. Inside, he saw Mira again. She stood near the control chamber, speaking softly to one of her attendants. Her voice carried both strength and sadness, like someone trying to hide fear. When she noticed Paul, she gave him a faint smile. "Are you the mechanic they spoke of?" she asked. "Yes, Princess," Paul answered, bowing his head slightly. His hands were shaking as he opened his toolkit. The engineers showed him the failing power relay. It was burned and unstable. Paul examined it with care. He asked for certain tools, but the alien engineers hesitated, doubting his knowledge. Mira raised her hand and told them to listen. Paul bent over the system, worked with slow patience, and after long minutes of silence, the hum of power returned. The ship's core lit up with soft blue light. The engineers were surprised, but Mira's eyes lit with genuine gratitude. She stepped closer and said, "You have done more than fix a machine. You have given me time I could not afford to lose." Paul felt his face grow warm. He had never been praised by a royal before. He shrugged and said, "Just doing my job, Princess." But he noticed something strange. As she spoke, Mira's hands trembled slightly. Her eyes shifted away as if she feared being watched. Paul saw the weight in her shoulders, a burden she carried quietly. She was no ordinary princess visiting for ceremony. Something deeper was hidden behind her calm words. That night, Paul could not sleep. He sat by the window of his small quarters, staring at the stars. He kept thinking of the way Mira had looked at him, as if she wanted to say more, but could not. Why would a princess care about a station mechanic? Why did she look so troubled? The next day, Mira returned to the hangar, but not with her guards. She came quietly, her robe covering her crown. She asked for Paul. The hangar chief was startled, but he called Paul out. Mira asked if they could speak in private. They walked to a quiet corner of the station where the hum of machines drowned out most sounds. Mira lowered her hood. Her face showed the same strength as before, but her eyes carried sorrow. She spoke softly so no one else could hear. You saved my ship, Paul, and for that I trust you. I must share something I cannot tell the others. If word spreads, I will lose everything. Paul's chest tightened. He did not know why she would trust him, a simple man with royal secrets. Mira took a deep breath and continued. My empire is bound by galactic law. It says that an heir must marry before the time of succession, or the crown will pass to another house. My father is dying. The day of succession is near. If I do not wed, I will lose the crown, and with it, the freedom of my people. Paul stood frozen. He did not know what to say. He was a mechanic, not a noble. Why was she telling him this? Mira's voice shook as she added, They want me to marry one of the alien nobles, but they are cruel, cold, and only seek power. If I join with them, my empire will fall into their hands. I cannot allow that. Yet I have no one else I can turn to. Paul finally found his voice. Why me? I am just a man who fixes ships. Her eyes locked on his. For the first time, her royal mask fell away, and he saw the desperation in her soul. Because you are human. Your kind carries a spirit that no law can break. I need that spirit beside me. Without it, my crown will be lost. Paul's heart pounded. The stars outside the station seemed brighter, sharper, as if the galaxy itself was waiting for his answer. He never thought his simple life would bring him here, standing before a princess who asked him for something greater than he had ever dreamed. The silence between Paul and Princess Mira stretched long after her words. He could still hear the faint hum of the station walls and the distant clank of cargo being moved. His heart was beating faster than it ever had before. A princess had just told him she could lose her empire if she did not marry. More than that, she had told him she needed someone like him, a human, to protect her crown. Paul wanted to laugh, not because he thought it was a joke, but because the idea was so far beyond his small world. He had grown up fixing pipes and engines, never leaving the station, never speaking to anyone higher than the hangar chief. Yet here he was, being asked to stand beside a princess of an empire that ruled across stars. Mira's eyes were steady, though her voice trembled as she spoke again. I would not have shared this with you if I did not believe you were different from the others around me. The nobles on my world do not see me as a person. To them, I am only a key to power. They wait for me to stumble so they can take my crown. But I cannot let them. My father built a fragile peace. If I lose the throne, that peace will fall apart, and millions will suffer. Paul rubbed his hands together, trying to find words. Princess, I understand this is important, but what can I do? I am not a warrior. I am not a leader. I am not even part of your people. Mira's gaze softened. That is exactly why I came to you. You are not part of their endless struggles for power. You are human, and humans are not bound by the same chains as the nobles. You are free to choose. That freedom is what my empire needs. If I marry you, galactic law will recognize the union. No noble can claim my throne if I have a husband. Paul's breath caught. The idea struck him like a hammer. You mean marry you? Yes, Mira whispered. Her crown seemed to dim for a moment, as if reacting to her heavy words. It may sound sudden, but the law is clear. I must marry before the day of succession, or everything is lost. Paul leaned back, against the metal wall. His hands were greasy from work, his shirt torn in 2 places, his boots scuffed and patched. He was a man who lived among machines, not royalty. The thought of standing beside Mira as her husband felt like a dream pulled from someone else's life. But then he remembered the way she had looked at him the day before, when he fixed her ship. It was not the look of someone who saw him as small. It was the look of someone who saw him as capable, someone who carried a strength she could not find elsewhere. Why not another human? Paul asked slowly. There are other workers here, other traders who pass through this station. Mira shook her head. I do not trust chance. I chose you because I saw how you worked. You did not panic when others failed. You did not bow to me as if I were a goddess. You treated me with honesty. That is what I need, not flattery, not fear. Honesty. Her words pressed on Paul's chest. He looked at her and saw not just a princess, but a young woman fighting against an empire that wanted to crush her. She had all the power in the galaxy, yet she was still cornered by laws and nobles who wanted to chain her. Paul ran a hand over his face and sighed. This is more than I ever thought I would face. If I agree, my life changes forever. If I refuse, what happens to you? Mira's voice grew heavy. If you refuse, I will be forced to marry one of the nobles. The strongest among them is Lord Rano. He is ruthless, cruel, and hungers for war. If he gains the throne through me, he will spread his armies across the galaxy. Whole worlds will burn. I will become nothing more than his tool. Paul's stomach twisted. He could see the pain in her eyes as she said those words. She was a princess. Yet she was trapped. She could not save herself without help. And somehow, she had chosen him. For a moment, Paul thought of walking away. It would be easy to return to his small life, fixing ships and watching stars through the station window. But then another thought came. If Mira lost her crown, it would not only be her empire that suffered. Humanity itself would remain ignored, treated as small and unimportant. But if she married a human, then the galaxy would have to acknowledge humanity as equal. The thought filled him with both fear and pride. He imagined humans walking proudly in alien halls, no longer overlooked but respected. His decision could shape the future of his people. Mira's hand trembled as she reached out toward him. Paul, I know I ask much, but I have no one else. Will you help me? He stared at her hand. Grease still stained his fingers from the morning's work. Yet when he placed his hand in hers, her crown glowed softly, as if it had been waiting for his touch. Paul did not speak right away. His mind was heavy with doubts, but deep inside, something stronger was stirring. He thought of his mother, who once told him that humans were stronger than they knew, that one day they would prove it to the stars. Finally, he said, I will help you. I will stand with you, princess. If marriage is the way to save your crown, then I will do it. Mira's eyes filled with relief. For a moment, the weight she carried seemed lighter. Thank you, Paul. You do not know what this means. Crown glowed brighter, casting soft light across the metal walls of the station. It felt as if the galaxy itself had heard his promise. But as Paul held her hand, he also felt the beginning of a storm. The nobles would not accept this union easily. They would fight it, mock it, and try to break it. He was only a mechanic, and now he was stepping into a battle that stretched across empires. He squeezed Mira's hand gently. If I am to stand with you, then I must be ready for what comes. I do not know what trials lie ahead, but I will not turn away. Mira's lips curved into a faint smile. Together, we will face them. The promise was made, but Paul did not sleep that night. He lay awake on his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling of his small room. His mind raced with questions that had no answers. How could a mechanic marry a princess? How could one man stand against alien nobles who ruled entire fleets? He wanted to believe his decision was right, but fear crept into his chest like a cold shadow. Outside his window, the stars burned silently. Paul thought of his people. For years, humans had been ignored in the great councils of the galaxy. They were seen as workers, traders, or wanderers, never as leaders. Now, with Mira's request, everything could change. If he married her, Humans would be written into galactic law as equals. It was not just Mira's crown at stake. It was the place of all humanity in the universe. The next morning, Paul returned to the hangar. Workers whispered as he passed. News spread quickly across the station, though no one yet knew the full truth. Some spoke with envy, others with disbelief. The idea that a mechanic could stand beside a princess was too strange for them to accept. Mira met him in the quiet corner, where they had spoken before. Her silver robe shimmered in the station's dim lights. Her face was calm, but Paul could see the tension in her eyes. "You look troubled," she said softly. Paul gave a tired smile. "I spent the night wondering what my life will become. I fix engines, princess. I do not sit on thrones. I do not know the language of councils or the ways of nobles." Mira's gaze did not waver. "Do you think I was born knowing how to rule? Every day I carry the weight of decisions that could harm millions. I am not strong because I never fear. I am strong because I act even when fear is heavy. You have that strength too. You proved it when you fixed my ship. You acted when others failed." Paul wanted to argue, but her words pressed deep into his heart. He had never thought of himself as strong. Yet he remembered the look in her eyes when he agreed to help. She believed in him more than he believed in himself. They walked together through the station corridors. Guards followed at a distance, but Mira waved them to stay back. She wanted to speak freely with Paul. "Do you know what will happen after we wed?" she asked. Paul shook his head. "Galactic law is binding," Mira explained. "Once we are married, my crown is protected. The nobles will have no choice but to recognize it. But they will not accept it quietly. They will mock you. They will test you. They may even challenge the marriage. You must be ready." Paul's stomach tightened. He had expected resistance, but hearing it in her voice made it real. "How do I prepare for something like that?" Mira's voice grew steady. "By remembering who you are. Do not try to become a noble. Do not pretend to be something you are not. They will expect you to fail. But if you stand as yourself, as human, you will surprise them. That is how you will endure." Her words gave Paul a strange kind of courage. He had no weapons, no armies, but perhaps he had something the nobles could not understand. Humanity's stubbornness, its refusal to bow, its will to fight even when the odds were impossible. Later that day, a gathering was held in the great hall of the station. Nobles from Mira's empire had arrived after hearing rumors of her choice. They wore robes lined with gems, their faces sharp with pride. They looked at Paul as if he were a child who had wandered into a palace. One of them, Lord Varric, stepped forward. His voice was cold and sharp. "Princess Mira, we hear strange whispers. They say you plan to wed a human mechanic. Surely this is a joke. Galactic law demands a marriage worthy of your crown." Mira stood tall, her silver crown glowing faintly. "It is no joke. Paul is my choice. He will be my husband, and by law my crown will remain mine." The nobles gasped, their whispers filling the hall. Varric sneered. "A human cannot be consort to our empire. They are weak, simple creatures. This station worker is unfit to even polish the stones of your throne." Paul's fists clenched at his side. He wanted to shout, but Mira placed a hand on his arm. She spoke calmly, yet firmly. "Galactic law does not measure worth by noble birth. It recognizes the bond of marriage. I have chosen Paul, and the law will honor that." The hall grew louder with protests, but the law was clear. None could deny her right to choose, though their faces burned with anger. When the nobles left, Mira and Paul stood alone for a moment. Paul's voice was low. "They hate me already. What if they try to destroy us?" Mira looked at him with quiet strength. "Let them hate. Their hate is built on pride. Pride blinds them. It makes them underestimate you. That will be their Mistake. Her confidence steadied Paul. He was still afraid, but he began to see the path ahead. He would not need to outmatch the nobles with wealth or titles. He only needed to stand firm, to refuse to be broken. That night, the station buzzed with rumors. Some humans cheered in secret, proud that one of their own had risen so high. Others feared that it would bring trouble upon them all. Alien traders scoffed, saying it would never last. But no matter what they said, one truth had spread across the stars. A princess had chosen a human mechanic to be her husband. Paul sat by the window again, looking at the endless sky. His decision was made, but the weight of it pressed heavy on him. He thought of his people, of Mira, of the empire she would soon lead. He thought of the nobles' cruel faces and their scornful words. He felt small against them, but he also felt something growing inside him, a fire that refused to die. The next day, Mira returned to him with a simple question. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Paul took a deep breath. He was still afraid, but his answer was steady. "Yes, I will not turn back." The day of the wedding came faster than Paul expected. The station was decorated in silver banners, glowing lanterns, and strange crystal ornaments brought by Mira's attendants. The hangar where Paul once fixed broken ships was transformed into a royal chamber. Tall columns of light rose from the floor, filling the air with a soft glow. Musicians from Mira's empire played gentle tones that echoed like water flowing over stone. Humans and aliens gathered together, drawn by curiosity, disbelief, or hope. Paul stood in front of a mirror in his small quarters, adjusting the robe he had been given. It was simple compared to the gowns of nobles, but the fabric shimmered faintly. Like starlight woven into cloth, he hardly recognized himself. His hands, once rough and covered in grease, were now clean, though scars still marked his fingers. He wondered if the people would laugh at him, a mechanic standing where emperors once stood. A knock came at his door. Mira entered, dressed in silver and blue robes that shone with every step she took. Her crown glowed brighter than ever before, casting soft light across her face. She looked calm, yet her eyes carried both hope and worry. When she saw Paul, her lips curved into a faint smile. "You look ready," she said. "I feel anything but ready," Paul admitted. Mira stepped closer. "Neither do I. But sometimes we must step forward even when fear is heavy." Her words eased him. Together they walked toward the hangar where the ceremony awaited. Guards and attendants followed at a distance, but for a moment Paul felt as if it was only him and Mira walking side by side. The hall was filled with people. Humans from the station stood shoulder to shoulder, some smiling with pride, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Alien nobles sat in their jeweled chairs, their faces sharp with scorn. At the center stood the high priest of Mira's empire, holding a staff topped with a glowing crystal. His deep voice echoed as he spoke the words of the old rite. "By law and tradition, the crown of Calora cannot pass without a bond. The heir must wed, or the throne shall fall to others. Princess Mira has chosen her partner. Step forward, human." Paul swallowed hard and stepped into the circle of light. Whispers filled the hall. Some laughed under their breath, others muttered angrily. But Mira walked beside him, her chin raised high, her crown glowing brighter with every step. The priest lifted the staff. "The rite shall be performed, the vows shall be spoken. Let crown and bond be tested." Two attendants carried forward a golden crown. It floated between Mira and Paul, glowing softly. The priest explained the custom. "This crown holds the light of the empire. It will judge the bond. If their hands unite in truth, the crown will shine. If their bond is false, the crown will fade." Paul's chest tightened. This was no ordinary ceremony. It was a test, one that all could see. Mira reached for his hand. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her grip was steady once they touched. Paul felt warmth flow through her palm. Not just physical warmth, but something deeper. Something that calmed his restless heart. The crown glowed. At first it was faint, as if uncertain. Then it grew brighter, brighter still, until the entire hall was bathed in silver light. Gasps echoed through. The crowd. The glow was stronger than even the priest expected. "It accepts the bond," the priest declared, his voice filled with awe. "The crown shines in truth." Mira's eyes filled with relief. Paul, stunned, could only stare at the crown. He had feared it would fail, that the bond would be rejected. Instead, the crown shone brighter than anyone had ever seen. The priest raised his staff again. "By the power of galactic law and the traditions of Kalora, I declare this union sealed. Princess Mira is now Queen Mira. Her crown stands, and with her stands her consort, Paul of Earth." The hall erupted. Some humans cheered loudly, their voices proud. Alien nobles rose in anger, their faces twisted with rage. Lord Varek shouted from his seat, "This is a trick! The law cannot bind a human to our crown. This is an insult to the Empire." But the priest raised his hand. "The crown has spoken. The law is clear. None may deny it." Mira turned to Paul, her eyes shining with both joy and sorrow. She knew this victory was only the beginning. She whispered, "You are part of my world now. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Paul nodded, his voice steady though his heart raced. Together. After the ceremony, a feast was held. Long tables were filled with alien dishes and human meals brought from the station's kitchens. Musicians played songs both strange and familiar. Yet even as people celebrated, Paul could feel the eyes of the nobles watching him with cold fury. Their anger was like a storm waiting to break. Late that night, Paul and Mira stood on a balcony overlooking the stars. The station floated silently, surrounded by endless darkness and distant suns. Paul leaned on the railing, his robe shifting, in the soft air. "I never thought my life would lead here," he said quietly. "I was meant to fix engines, not marry queens." Mira looked at him with gentle eyes. "Perhaps that is why you were chosen. The nobles live in palaces, blinded by pride. But you, Paul, you are real. You know the value of work, of honesty, of standing firm even when the odds are against you. That is what my empire needs." Paul turned his eyes to the stars. For the first time, he felt as if they were not so far away. He was no longer just a mechanic watching them from a window. He was part of their story now, but even as he felt hope, he also felt unease. He remembered the faces of the nobles, their fury burning brighter than any star. They would not remain silent. They would test him, perhaps even try to tear apart what the crown had sealed. He gripped the railing tighter. He did not know what trials were coming, but he knew this. He would not let Mira fall. He had made his choice, and he would stand by it. Behind them, the crown on Mira's head glowed faintly, as if it too was watching the stars, ready for the battles that lay ahead. The days after the wedding were filled with noise. The station buzzed with voices of traders, workers, and travelers who could not stop speaking of the human who had married a queen. Some were proud, some were angry, and many could not believe. It had truly happened. Across the empire, messages carried the news that Queen Mira had chosen a human mechanic as her husband. Paul walked through the station with new eyes upon him. Humans nodded with quiet respect, while aliens often sneered or whispered insults when they thought he could not hear. He tried to ignore them, but the weight of their stares pressed on him everywhere he went. Mira stayed close to him. She never wavered, though Paul could see her burden growing heavier. She knew the nobles would not accept the marriage without a fight. The law had bound her crown, but their pride would push them toward rebellion. Her fears came true sooner than expected. Evening, as Mira and Paul met with the station council, the doors burst open. Lord Rano entered with a group of armored guards. He was taller than any man Paul had seen, his skin dark as stone, his eyes glowing with sharp fury. His voice was deep and carried through the hall like thunder. "This union is a disgrace," Rano declared. "A crown of stars cannot be shared with a station worker from a forgotten world. I will not bow to a human." Gasps echoed through the hall. Mira rose to her feet, her crown glowing faintly. "Galactic law is clear, Rano. The crown accepts my bond. You cannot deny it." Rano's lips curled into a cruel smile. "The law may protect your claim, but tradition demands strength. If your husband is truly worthy, let him prove it. I challenge him to the trial of champions." Paul felt the blood drain from his face. He had heard of such trials. They were ancient duels, fought before witnesses to decide honor and legitimacy. He had never imagined he would be called to one. Mira's voice grew sharp. "The trial is not needed. The crown has already spoken." But Rano only laughed, his deep voice shaking the hall. "The people will never follow a queen who hides behind law alone. If your human cannot stand against me, then your bond is weak. If he falls, your claim will shatter." The nobles in the hall murmured in agreement. Their eyes burned with the hope of seeing Paul fail. Paul's heart pounded. He wanted to step back to refuse, but he saw Mira's face. She tried to hide it, but fear flickered in her eyes. Not fear for herself, but for him. He realized then that if he refused, the nobles would never respect her rule. They would always whisper that her husband was too weak to defend her. Paul took a deep breath and stepped forward. His voice was steady, though his body shook inside. "I accept your challenge." The hall fell silent. Mira turned to him, her eyes wide. "Paul, you do not have to do this." He looked at her, his voice low but firm. "If I do nothing, they will never stop. If I fight, at least I have a chance to prove them wrong." Mira wanted to argue, but she saw the fire in his eyes. She knew she could not take this choice from him. She only whispered, "Then I will stand with you, whatever happens." The trial was set for the next day. The arena was prepared in the largest hall of the station, a place once used for trade gatherings but now turned into a ring of battle. Word spread quickly, and soon the entire station was alive with anticipation. Humans and aliens alike crowded the halls, eager to see the fight. Some hoped for Paul's victory, but many more expected his defeat. That night, Mira sat with Paul in their quarters. She tried to hide her worry, but her hands never stopped moving, twisting the fabric of her robe. Paul placed his hand over hers. "No, I cannot match him in strength," Paul admitted. "He is trained for battle. I am not. But I know how to think. I know how to use what is around me. That is how humans survive. That is what I must rely on." Mira's eyes filled with both fear and pride. "Then use every ounce of that strength. Remember that you do not fight only for me. You fight for our people, and for every voice that has been silenced by those who believe only power matters." Paul nodded. Her words gave him courage. When the morning came, the arena was filled. Bright lights shone down on the circle of steel where the trial would be fought. The nobles sat in high seats, their eyes sharp with hunger. The humans of the station pressed together, hoping to see their own kind stand tall for the first time in history. Rano entered the arena first, his armor gleaming with sharp edges, his weapon glowing with energy. He raised it high, his voice booming. "I will end this farce. The Empire will not be stained by weakness." Paul entered next, wearing no armor, holding only a simple staff given to him by the attendants. He looked small compared to Rano, but his eyes were steady. The priest raised his staff. "The trial begins. Fight with honor. The victor shall stand as truth. The signal was given, and Rano charged like a storm. His blade swung with force that could shatter stone. Paul barely dodged, rolling across the floor. The crowd roared, with laughter and cheers. Again Rano attacked, his strength overwhelming. Paul knew he could not meet force with force. Instead, he used speed. He darted away, using the staff to block, to trip, to strike in quick bursts. He thought like a mechanic, searching for weakness, watching how Rano moved. Every time Rano swung too wide, Paul used the opening to strike his side. Every time Rano grew arrogant, Paul made him stumble. The crowd began to change. The laughter faded as people saw the human was not falling. Murmurs spread, voices rising with surprise. Rano grew angry. His swings became wild, his pride blinding. Him. Paul seized the moment. He feinted left, then struck Rano's leg, sending him crashing to the ground. The arena shook with the force of his fall. Paul stood over him, breathing hard, his staff pressed against Rano's throat. The hall fell silent. The priest raised his staff. The trial is complete. The human stands victorious. The bond is proven true. The arena erupted. Humans shouted with joy, their voices echoing louder than ever before. Many aliens sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they had seen. Mira rushed into the arena, her crown glowing bright as she stood by Paul's side. Her eyes shone with pride. "You did it," she whispered. Paul, still catching his breath, managed a small smile. "I told you, humans survive by refusing to bow." The arena was quiet, except for the hum of energy shields and the whispers of spectators. Paul stood in the center, gripping his staff tightly. The floor beneath him was polished metal, reflecting the glow of the lights above. Across from him, Lord Rano stepped forward, his eyes full of fury. The nobles had been forced to accept the trial, but their anger burned like fire, and they expected him to fail. Mira watched from the royal platform. Her crown shone brightly, casting soft light over her face. She clenched her fists, hoping Paul could withstand the trial, but knowing the odds were against him. Paul was a mechanic, not a soldier trained in combat. He had to rely on his mind, his reflexes, and the spirit of humanity. Rano raised his weapon, a blade made of condensed energy. It hummed and sparked, radiating heat that made the air shimmer. The crowd fell silent as he charged. Paul did not move quickly enough to avoid the first swing, but he rolled to the side, letting the energy blade strike the floor with a deafening clash. Sparks flew, lighting the arena in brief bursts. Paul's heart pounded, but he remembered Mira's words. Humans survive by refusing to bow, by using what they have, and by never giving up. He watched Rano carefully, studying his movements. Every strike, every feint, every step told a story. Rano was strong and fast, but he relied too much on power. That would be Paul's advantage. Rano swung again. Paul ducked, using the staff to deflect the strike. The weapon's energy hissed as metal met blade. Paul jabbed at Rano's side, not to harm him seriously, but to disrupt his balance. Rano stumbled slightly, and the crowd murmured in surprise. Humans had never fought like this in the eyes of the Empire. They fought smart, with strategy, patience, and determination. Rano's face darkened with rage. He advanced faster, swinging wildly. Paul had to retreat, keeping calm while looking for an opening. He noticed the edge of the arena had narrow pillars and exposed wiring. A plan formed in his mind. He moved toward the pillars, baiting Rano to follow. Rano lunged with full force, expecting Paul to dodge at the last moment. Paul rolled under the strike and used his staff to sweep Rano's legs. The warlord fell hard against a pillar, the energy blade sparking against metal. The audience gasped. Paul had managed to use his surroundings cleverly. It was not strength that had won him the edge, but intelligence and awareness. Rano rose quickly, fury blazing in his eyes. He roared, swinging his blade in wide arcs. Paul kept moving, using small jumps, spins, and quick strikes to keep Rano off balance. Each time Rano attacked too quickly, Paul dodged and struck back. He used the environment like a machine, turning the arena into a tool for defense and offense. The nobles whispered among themselves. Many were shocked. This human had survived the first round of attacks and was now controlling the flow of the fight. His movements were unlike any they had seen. He was not brute strength. He was calculation, patience, and courage combined. Mira held her breath. She had feared Paul might fall, but now she began to see something extraordinary. The human who had fixed her ship was standing firm against one of the most feared warriors in her empire. His determination burned brighter than any weapon. Rano growled and struck again. This time, Paul feinted a step to the left, then used his staff to trip the warlord. Rano stumbled into the edge of the arena, sparks flying from the metal floor. Paul moved quickly, pressing the attack just enough to keep Rano from recovering fully. The crowd was silent, then erupted in cheers. Humans shouted with pride, amazed that one of their own could stand against such a mighty opponent. Many aliens watched in disbelief, realizing that the trial was not just about strength. It was about spirit, cleverness, and the courage to face impossible odds. Rano's attacks became more reckless. He tried to crush Paul with power, swinging his blade with blinding speed. But Paul used the lessons he had learned as a mechanic. He observed, predicted, and acted precisely. When Rano overextended, Paul used the staff to push him off balance and strike his side. Finally, Rano faltered. His pride, his anger, and his expectation of easy victory had blinded him. Paul seized the moment. He moved swiftly, tripping Rano and forcing him to fall on one knee. The warlord's energy blade sparked uselessly as Paul pressed his staff against his shoulder. The arena fell silent. Even the nobles could not hide their shock. The human mechanic had bested one of the Empire's strongest warriors without a single strike of real violence, relying on skill, intelligence, and courage. The priest raised his staff. The trial is complete. The human stands victorious. The bond is proven true before the eyes of all. Mira ran forward, her crown glowing brighter than ever. She grasped Paul's hands, her voice trembling with relief and pride. You did it. You have proven what I have known. Humans are strong in ways the galaxy has never understood. Paul, breathing heavily, smiled. I just did what I had to do. I stood because I could not let you fall. I stood because humanity never bows when it knows it is right. The crown on Mira's head pulsed with light, as if celebrating the victory. The nobles were silent, many still angry, but they could not deny the truth. The human had passed the trial, and the law had recognized the bond. In the crowd, humans cheered louder than ever. Their voices carried through the station, echoing across corridors and into the hearts of those who had never believed they could matter. Today, a human had changed the course of an empire. Mira embraced Paul. Together, she whispered, we will face the next challenge. But today, you have made history. Paul looked at her, exhausted but proud. We stand together. That is all that matters. And as the lights of the arena reflected in their eyes, it was clear to everyone watching that humanity had proven its worth, not with weapons or armies, but with courage, intelligence, and the refusal to bow to fear. The stars outside the station shone brightly. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. A human had stood against a warrior, and through spirit and determination, had changed the destiny of a crown. The victory in the arena had changed everything. Word spread across the station, across the fleets, and across the worlds of Mira's empire. A human had stood before a warlord and survived. He had proved his courage, his intelligence, and his loyalty. For the first time, humans were not whispers in the shadows of the galaxy. They were seen, acknowledged, and respected. Paul walked beside Mira as she entered her throne room. The crown gleamed on her head, its light stronger than ever. The nobles had been summoned to witness her ruling council. Many still carried scorn in their eyes, but most dared not speak openly against the queen. The law and the trial had left. No room for doubt. Paul had stood and proven the bond. Mira's voice was calm but strong. The empire faces a new beginning. The crown is safe and its protection is no longer tied to fear or tradition alone. Today we have shown that strength comes not only from birth or power, but from courage, loyalty, and heart. A hush fell over the nobles. Some nodded, acknowledging the truth. Others remained silent, plotting silently in their minds. But none could undo what had been done. Paul stood at Mira's side, the human mechanic who had become consort, and for the first time he realized the weight of what he carried. The queen turned to him, her eyes soft. "You have given more than I ever imagined. Not just your strength in the trial, but your spirit. You have reminded us all that hope and courage can change destiny." Paul's hand brushed against hers. "I only did what anyone who cares would do. I stood because I could not let the empire fall. I stood because I could not let you fall, and I stood because humanity deserves to be seen." The council began its work. Plans for the empire were drawn, decisions were made, and the nobles began to accept that the human beside Mira was now part of the empire's story. Paul observed carefully, learning the laws, understanding the ways of diplomacy, and watching how Mira led with a steady hand. He did not pretend to be a noble, but he used his own knowledge, his understanding of people and his practical skills to help make decisions stronger and fairer. Days passed, and the empire adjusted to the new reality. Humans were allowed greater access to trade, exploration, and positions of responsibility. The people began to whisper of the human consort who had changed the empire simply by standing tall. Even the youngest citizens began to dream differently, imagining a galaxy where anyone could rise if they had courage. Yet, challenges remained. Lord Rano and some nobles continued to plot quietly. They could not forgive the defeat, and their ambition burned hotter than ever. But Mira and Paul were prepared. The queen had learned that law alone could protect the crown, but loyalty and trust in her people would protect the empire's heart. Paul had learned that courage and intelligence could stand against even the fiercest enemies. Together, they were a force that could not easily be broken. One evening, Mira and Paul stood at the balcony of the Royal Tower, overlooking the station. Ships glided through the space lanes, lights blinking like distant stars. The galaxy seemed vast, endless, but it now felt a little smaller, a little closer, and full of promise. Mira rested her head on Paul's shoulder. "Do you see it, Paul? All the worlds that could be changed because we chose to stand together?" Paul smiled faintly. "I see it. And I see that we have just begun. The empire is safe for now. But more than that, I see hope for everyone who has been ignored or underestimated. Humanity has a place here now, and that place is respected." Mira turned to face him, her eyes shining with determination. "The crown may protect the throne, but our choices protect the empire. You have shown me that even someone from a small world can make a difference. That is the greatest strength of all." Paul took her hands in his. "We did this together, and together, we will continue to protect it." The stars outside seemed to twinkle brighter, reflecting the promise of a new era. For the first time, humans were not just workers, travelers, or observers. They were equals in the galaxy, recognized by law, courage, and heart. In the weeks that followed, Paul adapted to his new life. He learned council procedures, met with ambassadors, and even began teaching young humans how to navigate the galaxy with skill and wisdom. He never forgot his roots as a mechanic. His hands still bore scars, and he still worked with tools when needed. But now his work had a new purpose, building bridges between worlds, fixing not just engines but misunderstandings and distrust. Mira, now fully embraced as queen, led with fairness and strength. Her decisions reflected both the wisdom of her ancestors and the lessons she had learned from Paul. Together, they began reforms to make the empire stronger, fairer, and more inclusive. Aliens and humans alike began to trust that the crown would serve the people, not just a single family or noble. One day, Paul and Mira visited a newly rebuilt spaceport. Children ran around, laughing as humans and aliens played together. Traders from distant worlds arrived, greeted with respect and curiosity. Mira watched Paul helping a young human repair a small spacecraft, showing patience and care. She smiled, realizing that this simple human had changed more than just her crown. He had changed the Empire's heart. She took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You have done more than I could have imagined. You have not just protected the crown. You have given hope to everyone who will come after us." Paul looked at the children, at the stars, at the people moving through the station. "I only stood when I had to. The rest is theirs to build. But I will stand with you as long as I am needed." Mira rested her head on his shoulder. "Then let us stand together, Paul, always." And so, a new era began. The crown was secure, the empire was stronger, and humanity had finally found its place among the stars. The galaxy had witnessed that courage, loyalty, and heart could surpass birth, wealth, or power. And at the center of it all, Paul and Mira stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future might bring. The stars outside glowed brighter than ever. A mechanic and a queen had changed history. Together, they had shown the galaxy that even the smallest voice could carry the weight of destiny and turn fear into hope. The Empire looked to the future with new eyes, and humanity had a shining place in its story.